My name is Rob Raskin, and I'm here to talk about family court corruption that took place in Florence, Alabama. You know, when you roll through life and you have no connection with DHR, Department of Human Resources, or CPS, Child Protective Services, you've really got no idea what they're all about, and you trust that if a child is in danger, they're going to step in and do the right thing. Well, one day in 2011, they just simply stole our niece right out of my sister-in-law's house in Florence, Alabama. And when they did, I initially thought, maybe it's a mistake, maybe it's an overzealous worker. There's got to be some confusion. Maybe my sister-in-law is just overdramatic. It's got to blow over. She'll be home before we know it. Little did we know that we were going to get thrust into one of the most corrupt states in the country for family court. As we learned more and more, because I'm a retired businessman for years, so I immediately said something's wrong here, seriously wrong. As we learned more and more, we discovered very clearly that the federal government provides funding to the states to match the money that they spend for foster care. So therefore, the more children that the state converts to being in the foster care system, the more money the state spends and the more money they get from the federal government. It's so unbelievable that it's almost like the movies that you see where the creepy old truck slowly rolls down the street and grabs a kid right off the street. Because in essence, that's what they do. They talk to the child and they determine, when talking to the child, any type of little string that they can use to say, oop, here's evidence of abuse. Like, for example, in our case, when Danielle, my niece, was supposed to give water to the dogs and didn't, my sister-in-law said, until you give water to the dogs, you're not getting a glass of water. So it was 10 minutes, and she learned to give the dogs water. She's got an IQ of 63. It took her a little while to learn that life lesson. Well, that was one of the evidences of abuse. Physical abuse because she was withheld water for 10 minutes in an air-conditioned home. The second element of abuse was that Danielle told the social worker that she was told by her aunt that she will never be a veterinarian. The actual line was, I want to be a veterinarian. Okay, well then you better do your homework and study, because if you don't study and pay attention, you'll never grow up to be a veterinarian. That was mental abuse. Based on the mental abuse and the physical abuse, the social worker gets an attorney, and the attorney goes into court without my sister-in-law being there, and in an ex parte fashion presents a motion to the judge that says the guardian rights of this person, Aunt Judy, should be terminated because she's abusing the child. The judge, of course, Rubber Stamp Jackson I call him, Billy Rubber Stamp Jackson, immediately grants the motion, and just like that, Aunt Judy, who's been raising this girl for a long time as her guardian, is no longer her guardian. Now, that's where it starts, not stops, because once the attorney is now appointed the guardian, the next thing that they do is they take the child and put the child wherever they want, because the attorney is the guardian. So the attorney takes Danielle and moves her hours away, where it's almost impossible for Judy to get to her, and makes her jump through all kinds of hoops to try to visit her. And in the meantime, she's telling Danielle, Aunt Judy doesn't want to talk to you anymore. So now Danielle is isolated. Not only did we lose Danielle from our family, but from Danielle's perspective, she just lost her aunt, her uncle, her sister, her cousins, her nieces, her nephews, and all of her friends from school. This kid now is totally isolated. Now, Aunt Judy was working on getting her into a program called Scope 310 to help challenged people. And so Aunt Judy was working on that, and so when she told the social worker at the beginning that she was working on that, because the social worker looked like she was trying to help at the very, very beginning, the social worker said, no problem, I will work on getting her into that program. She had absolutely no intention of getting her into that program. What she did for the entire year that she had her in foster care was to make arrangements to give her back to her birth mother. Now, her birth mother was the only person on the face of this earth that actually abused her, sexually, mentally, and emotionally. And the kicker of it is that the DHR file is not only inches thick, but the DHR file has all of the documentation of abuse. And in addition to that, there's no way that she ever qualified, the birth mother ever qualified, to be able to ever get this child back. This child there's no way that she and her domestic partner would ever have qualified any type of investigation. So, when they took the guardianship away from Aunt Judy, who was my wife's sister, my wife was automatically to be the next guardian. That was a court order from the state of Pennsylvania years ago when one of the sisters died who originally had Danielle, adopted her at birth. And so there was a court order that my wife, Kathleen, was supposed to be next in line to be the guardian. So the guardian ad litem down there totally ignored that. The judge totally ignored that. They just didn't even say anything about her. And so that's how Danielle got taken away, sent to a foster care home, and then sent to Pennsylvania, so out of state, to live with her birth mother. So when my wife comes to me and explains what's going on, we decided, well, the best course of action is to hire an attorney down there, get onto the docket, fly down there, go before the judge, and explain to the judge that she is the legal guardian with no further requirement or discussion of any kind. The court order is very clear from Pennsylvania. It says if anything happens where Judy can't be the guardian, Kathleen is automatically the guardian. Very clear, very simple. Kathleen flies all the way down to Alabama, 2,000 miles from where we live in Vegas, and has her court date. We go over what she's going to say, and we make sure that she's comfortable going in. I told her, don't worry if there's a lot of DHR people there, because sometimes that happens. She goes into court, and they pounce right on her, meaning the attorney who is now the guardian, saying, you don't even belong here. You have nothing to do with this case. You don't even, your niece doesn't even know you. This is a niece that comes out to Las Vegas. We take her on cruises. We talk to her all year long. We buy her gifts. All of a sudden, she doesn't know. The DHR their position is that Kathleen Kathleen is her aunt for 18 years, but Danielle doesn't even know her. So the judge says to Kathleen, you can stay in the court, but you can't say anything. So now Kathleen's in the court. She flew 2,000 miles, and neither she nor her attorney are allowed to speak. So it takes just a few minutes, and as soon as the judge sees the direction it's going in, which is that every DHR worker is perjuring themselves on the stand, he immediately says, you know what, my docket's too full today, so I don't really have time for this. My wife's attorney says, Your Honor, she flew 2,000 miles, and this is her court date, and she's on the docket. He says, yeah, well, maybe I'll see her tomorrow or the next day, but I don't have time to do this today. And so just like that, she lost her rights to even speak. So now she calls me from outside the courthouse and says, I cannot believe what is going on down here. It is so corrupt, it's unbelievable. Well, we ended up putting up our own website called StopDHRCorruption.com and inviting other families that have had similar issues in Alabama to tell us their stories. And I can't go over story after story after story now, but trust me when I tell you, it's absolutely unbelievable. The bottom line is this: the more kids in foster care, the more money the state of Alabama gets. And I guarantee you that it's not just the state of Alabama. I'm guaranteeing you that if a federal investigator would take on the case of actually following the money trail, what they would find is that that money is going back to people that it should not be going back to. And Judge Jackson, if you're listening, I'm specifically and directly accusing you because I know that you are behind it and some way you are involved with it. And the reason why I know that is because Safety Net is supposedly charging $289 a night, which is $60,000 a night for 200 children for a bed. That's $21 million a year for a guy who's got 4 buildings with 50 kids in each one, and this guy had no assets of any kind, and he had no background of any kind. He was working for a boys and girls club, And now all of a sudden, he's got a 200-bed facility that's bringing in $21 million a year. The government is matching it with $21 million a year. And if you're not making a percentage of that money somehow, directly or indirectly, I'll kiss your ass in Macy's window. And that's a promise from me. So the corruption is involved at every level. It starts with the social worker somehow getting involved. Once that social worker gets involved, the attorney gets called. Once the attorney gets called, the attorney gives the motions to the judge to remove the parental rights and to appoint the guardian. Once the guardian gets involved, then they can do whatever they want. So then they start their reprogramming of the kid's brain, and the judge goes ahead and remands the kid to someplace that I know in my heart, in every fiber of my being, is totally and completely corrupt. And if you follow that money trail, you'll find it. So there's nobody available to help is what the problem is. You call the state, and the state doesn't want to hear anything from you. We filed a complaint with the the Alabama Bar Association. We filed a 300-page complaint. They're supposed to then send that complaint to the attorney. The attorney is then supposed to review that 300-page complaint and prepare a response. The response is supposed to come back to the Judicial Review Board, to the Bar Association, and the Bar Association at that point is supposed to review the response from the attorney and decide what action to take. We sent a 300-page complaint into the Alabama Bar Association, and within 1 week, we received a letter saying, it's been reviewed by 2 attorneys down here, there's no merit, no cause, and your case is closed. Really? Well, was it Denise's cousin? Because Denise Birch was the attorney that we filed the complaint against, and I can't understand how it's possible that in 1 week's time, this entire case was closed. So that was the attorney. The Judicial Review Board so far hasn't told us anything. Mum's the word, and we haven't heard from them. I spoke to a federal special agent with the FBI up there. He said that he had presented it to the U.S. attorney down there in Huntsville, and the U.S. attorney said that they just don't have any statutes on which they can hang their hat to prosecute. Really? So what about the federal case in Illinois in 2005 where they found that the DHR was at fault just for not giving the parents a reasonable expectation of when their kids could be returned to them, let alone being stolen on hearsay, parental rights being taken away without even a hearing where the parents can't even talk, moving the kids hours away, telling the kids that their parents don't want to see them anymore, and then putting them in a facility that's $300 a night. What is it, the Taj Mahal? What's $300? What could possibly cost $300 a night? So anyway, we sent letters to everybody. We called everybody. We sent letters to every agency, federal government, state government, everybody you can think of when you're sitting there saying, I wonder if he ever called this. We did it. And in return, 33 initial packages went out. And out of those 33 packages, we didn't get one that said, we can help you. Because there simply isn't an agency that can help. So there's 2 problems. The first problem is that the money that the federal government is paying to the states is simply for keeping kids in foster care. They're not paying money to the state for anything else except to supplement the kids in foster care. Therefore, there is a tremendous incentive for the DHRs and the CPSs to take children, to get their claws into children, to take those children and to put them into foster care. And there's no incentive for them to ever give the children back. And while I'm at it, I'll tell you another thing. They don't want the kids that they should take. And what I mean by that is that when the parents are on drugs and they get a call, and we know this because we've spoken to many families in Alabama, when the parents, when the CPS comes out or DHR comes out and the kid is in a dangerous environment where the parent is on drugs, they take the kid away, they tell the parent, you got to take a drug test. Often, whether they pass it or they fail it, they still give the kid right back. They don't want that kid. They want healthy kids, healthy, clean-cut kids that aren't a problem. And kids like my niece that have an IQ of 63, and kids that are autistic, that don't talk and just sit there, they're the absolute best ones. $300 a day and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to give them medication. They're not strung out on drugs. They're just absolute little angels that were taken out of a nice, clean home. And in case you don't realize it, the statistic is that they're 6 times more likely to be abused or molested in a foster home or a foster care environment than they are in their own home. So if you think for 1 second that tens of thousands of parents, hundreds of thousands of parents, all throughout the country are all abusing their children to the point that 1, they have to be taken away. 2, they can never be given back because it's so bad that it can't be fixed. And 3, there's no relatives in that family that can take that child. The only solution is to take that child and put them into a $300 a bed night so that the federal government can match it. If you actually think that, you're crazy. It just absolutely is ludicrous. The situation is this: the tighter the budget gets for the states, the more money they need. And the more money they need, the more aggressive they get at stealing children. Trust me when I tell you, I've never been involved with courts, with criminal, with DHR, with family court. I've never been involved with it. I never even heard of it. When my wife first told me that Danielle was taken by DHR and it was a dependency hearing and they determined that Judy couldn't be the guardian and they took the kid away and they put the kid in foster care, I just looked at her and said, you got it wrong. You know, there's just no way that that could happen. They didn't steal nobody stole my niece. Well, that's exactly what they did, and it happens multiple times every day in every court in the country, with the judges breaking multiple laws in every case every day. This Judge Jackson in Florence, Alabama, actually has gone so far as to tell a psychiatrist, I give you permission to violate the HIPAA laws. And the psychiatrist said, are you nuts? You don't have the authority to do that. And Judge Jackson said, I don't have the authority to do that, but I have the authority to never send you another patient. And that's the corruption straight down to the bottom line. Whether it's the social worker, whether it's the guardian ad litem, the attorney that they appoint to represent the child, whether it's the judge, whether it's the district attorney, whether it's the psychiatrist, anybody in the system. The bottom line is, let's take this kid away from their parent or guardian and put this kid into the system. States throughout the country are reporting that they've got more kids in their custody now than ever. Record years. Really? So what happened this year? The parents got up on January 1st of 2012 and said, let's abuse our children this year at a record rate? How does that happen? Just so happens that the budgets are hurting, and all of a sudden these children are being stolen, converted into assets by the state. It's the biggest human trafficking in the United States, maybe even the world. When you think of human trafficking, you think of these poor women that come in from Mexico in a van and are forced into slavery. But the actual human trafficking is happening by our criminal judges. And I don't mean criminal judges, I mean judges that are criminals in this country. Every single one of them. So, 1, we have to stop the money. You stop the money, you stop the incentive. The federal government is spending millions of dollars of money that we don't have in the first place. Instead of borrowing money from China and giving it to these thieves, we need to stop the flow of money going to the DHRs and the states until there's a system that makes sense in place. I'm all for taking children out of homes that are being abused. I am totally against any agency having sole authority and discretion based on hearsay to take a child, decide unilaterally to take away the parental rights, go into court and have a judge simply stamp it, and that's it, it's done. You walk out, you don't have a kid anymore. That's exactly what happens every single day in every state in this country. It's got to stop. So the first thing is you've got to stop the money. And the second thing is there's got to be an agency that oversees this, because there's no place to go. We sent 33 packages out to every agency you can imagine, federal and state. Not one of them has bitten. And in the state, we actually had an attorney before the attorney that we have now that said to us, there's nothing I could do for you. DHR is too big, too powerful, and there's no way I'm going up against them. And that is the situation. I could tell you about tons of other ones, but I think I get my point across when I say, number one, honest, clean-cut, working people that have children that don't do anything wrong are in danger of losing their children any day. One quick case, a guy at work argues with another guy at work, and that second guy calls DHR and says, this guy's got an infant that's got no diapers, poop all over the walls, and are drug users with needles in the lawn. DHR comes out to investigate, and they don't even have an infant. They've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. The house is immaculate. There's absolutely no evidence of anything. It's clear that the call was a crank. The DHR representative says, however, I've got a certain amount of quota that I need to meet, so I need to take the kids away for 24 hours, talk to them, make sure they're okay, and then give them back to you tomorrow. The DHR worker takes those kids. It's been over 2 years. Perfectly fine parents, both work, spotless home, never thought they'd be in danger. So if you think for 1 second that this is something that happens to other people, think again. Because if you've got children, or if your children have children, they are not safe because the judges are the criminals that have to be stopped. And we have to have an agency, a federal agency, at arm's length that can take a look and step in and prosecute these people. And they should prosecute them based on kidnapping, conversion, and corruption, because that's exactly the laws that they're breaking. They're kidnapping these children when they take them for no apparent reason. They brainwash them just like they are kidnappers, that their family doesn't want them anymore. They convert them into their own assets, and then they split up the money. We were just rolling along. I was sitting at my dinner table when my wife got the call. 2 regular people that worked hard all day and were just sitting at our dinner table. And my wife tells me that our niece is gone. She was stolen by Alabama, and I chuckled. I'm not chuckling now. But I'm coming after every one of you bastards in Alabama and every one of you judges and attorneys at Guardian and Items throughout the country. Rob Raskin is now on the case. So you guys better look out. And Judge Jackson, you didn't let my wife talk when she was in your courtroom, but I've got a question for you. Can you hear us now? StopDHRcorruption.com. We received a call from my sister-in-law in Florence, Alabama, late last year, telling us that our niece was taken away by the Department of Human Resources. It went to court. Her rights were taken away as guardian. The judge put our niece into foster care, and ultimately they returned her to the only home on the face of the earth where she was abused and mistreated, physically, sexually, and emotionally. At first, I didn't believe it, and then I couldn't figure out why. But it turns out that the federal government gives money to the states for the kids that they put into foster care. The more kids in foster care, the more money they make. So in essence, what's happening throughout the country is that DHRs, Department of Human Resources, some states it's called CPS, they look for any reason at all, real or imaginary, to take your child. And once they do, they go to court. The judge terminates your parental rights, often without you ever being there. And once they do, the attorney is appointed guardian. The attorney gets to make the decision unilaterally as to where the child goes. They send the child hours away and ultimately adopt the child out. And the parent simply lost the child, and the child simply lost the parent.